Okay. Well, we have the stream going. Have a few out, but we've got enough here, and we're obviously still talking about the Kings. And you have your handout things. Okay, that might come in handy still. Uh, let's see here. Let me go ahead and turn my screen so I can handle it. Okay. Um, so we're going to be dealing with Baasha, uh, his overthrow, and then we're going to, because same thing happens to him that happened to Nadab, and then Ella, Zimri, and Omri, and Ahab. Now, Ahab probably was the first one of these that you might know who he is. Now, Asa, you may have heard of Asa. Like I say, he's generally considered a good king, but I don't think I could call him a good king because of the way his life ended. But we're going to deal with these kings of Israel today, for them. This is an older screen. But anyway, we see here, if you look at Nadab, he reigned for 2 years. Baasha uh, reigned for 24, a decent amount of time. But what's interesting is Nadab was of the line of Jeroboam, but remember the prophet had told that your line will be ended. Now, Baasha, last week we got into where prophet was sent to him and told him basically the same thing. Then we get to Ella. Uh, he reigned for a whopping 2 years, and he's going to get overthrown as well. And that next one reigns for 7 days, a 7 day king. And then we get another overthrow, and Omri becomes king. Now, his line stays for a decent amount of time, but, without God choosing kings in the northern kingdom, like He did in the southern kingdom for most of the time, it's a free for all. It's kind of like what you see in movies about Middle Ages with kingdoms, where it wasn't always the son that got to become the king because there'd be an uprising or something of that. Uh, so we won't really be talking about the kings of Judah. Let me get to this, and we can quickly get to the Okay. Four kings of Israel. So we're in First Kings 16, Dale. And we'll be there, I guess, quite a bit. So once again, just an overview of those kings. The kings we're going to concentrate on today are Ella, Zimri, Omri, and Ahab. Uh, just an overall map. You see, Israel was actually larger, but it wasn't, I would say, on the most part, if you took year after year, it generally was a little bit inferior to the might of the kingdom of Judah, and it obviously didn't last as long. You see here, and we'll have another map in today's lesson that shows the relationship between Samaria, Tirzah, and Shechem and Shiloh. And Shiloh was a very uh, well known city in the Old Testament. In fact, if you paid attention to my lesson yesterday, morning, uh, they found a big archaeological find in Shiloh, and it appears they have discovered an old platform where the tabernacle was, and also where the Ark of the Covenant would have been. And that would have been under the time of Eli, the judge and also high priest, the one that raised Samuel from the time he was about 5, had the two sons Hophni and Phinehas. Of course, they took the Ark Covenant to try to win a battle, and it was taken by the Philistines. But so anyway, you can see those cities were there. Shechem's another well-known city. Go back to Abraham, to Isaac, and Jacob. It's a prominent city. Tirzah is the initial capital of the northern kingdom or Israel, and Samaria is going to become. If we get that far today, we'll see that actually happen. So, Ella in Israel. So, screen's still looking good. It's doing good. Okay. Ella in Israel. Um, so, in 1 Kings 16, 18, 8 through 4 says, in the 26th year of Asa, king of Judah. Now, why do you think they would reference that? We've talked about that oftentimes kings deals more directly uh, with the northern kingdom kings, and Chronicles, excuse me, deals more with the Judah or the southern kingdom. Why would it tie these kings to a year of a king in the southern kingdom? What's your thoughts? Well, it does work that way for us, but why do you think they would have it would have been written this way? It ties them down historically. So when these were kings, so so someone on the outside, it would then give it a timeline. Now, what's neat about that is most histories don't do that. So a lot of people are really, I think, enthralled with like Egyptian history. Egyptian history never does that because to them, other people were inferior to them. So they would never reference a outside force. Also, uh, that's one thing that actually the movie Ten Commandments got right. There's a lot of error, even though I love the old Charlton Heston Ten Commandments movie. There's a lot of things that they kind of take really extreme liberties. In fact, go against what the Bible says on some things. But one of the things that they get right about that time period, Lifeline, uh, they get right about that time period is so when they didn't like something, the Pharaoh would just have it struck out, removed from history. And so, in fact, there's a belief that a lot of the reason you don't find Moses written into any of their histories is because exactly that's what's done. We know for a fact they've done that over and over. So their history is a little suspect a lot of times because they would, if they didn't like something, so like, let's put it in modern vernacular. So, you know, there's no, and this is not political, this is just the way it pretty much is. Donald Trump doesn't like, President Trump does not like President Biden and the things he did. So if this was Egyptian times and President Trump was Pharaoh Trump back in Egyptian days, uh, and he didn't like the previous Pharaoh, he would just have that Pharaoh removed from history. That's just the way they did it. So as a result, a lot of people go based on Egyptian history, and they're like, well, the Old Testament doesn't match up. It doesn't match up with. And like, why would you suspect that? Because in the Bible, the history we see in the Old Testament can be tested and tested, archaeological. You've got these overlaps of these things over and over again. The times are exactly when they say they are. So anyway, so it gives an exact time of when these kings were. Also, yes. Hmm. Yeah. Right. Yes. Yeah, and that's yeah, and there are some of those. This has it, but it's not together. There are some that do that. I'll look for one of those charts that shows that because it is nice. You see but they also interact with one another, and so that's why. So anyway, Elah, the son of Baasha, began to reign over Israel and Tirzah, and he reigned 2 years. But his servant Zimri, commander of half his chariots, it's kind of interesting of itself, conspired against him when he was at Tirzah, drinking himself drunk in the house of Arza, who was over the household of Tirzah. Uh, never good to get drunk. It's always going to have bad consequences. Zimri came and struck down and killed him in the 27th year of Asa, king of Judah, and reigned in his place. When he began to reign, as soon as he had seated himself on his throne, he struck down the house of Baasha. He did not leave a single male of his relatives or his friends. Now, we see this a lot of movies, TV series, they will do stuff like this where, when you have an uprising against the king, the, they'll go and kill all the males, And but that actually, things like that actually did happen, and that's what this guy did. Why would you kill all the male descendants? If you didn't kill them off, they liable to rise up and try to overthrow you later. So anyway, well, what's interesting is this wasn't just by happenstance that this happened. Anyway, verse 12 says, "Thus Zimri destroyed all the house of Baasha according to the word of the Lord, which he spoke against Baasha by Jehu the prophet, for all the sins of Baasha and the sins of Elah his son, which they sinned and which they made Israel to sin, provoking the Lord God of Israel to anger with their idols. Now the rest of the acts of Elah and all that he did, are they not written in the book of Chronicles, Kings of Israel?" And here, uh, here's that prophecy. The word of the Lord came to Jehu, son of Hananiah, against Baasha. That's in 1 Kings 16:1, saying, "Since I exalted you out of the dust, and made you leader over my people Israel, and you have walked in the way of Jeroboam, and have made my people Israel to sin, provoking me to anger with their sins. Behold, I will utterly sweep away Baasha and his house, and make your house like the house of Jeroboam, son of Nebat. Anyone belonging to Baasha who dies in the city, the dogs shall eat, and any one of his who dies in the field, the birds of the heavens shall eat." So we see that Baasha would get the same treatment as Jeroboam, and it would happen basically with their son as they begin to reign. And so Elah reigned 2 years, Nadab reigned 2 years, and both suffered the consequences of their fathers. Uh, what about Zimri? So in the 27th year, well, he began reigning in the 27th year. 27th year of uh, Asa, king of Israel, Zimri reigned 7 days in Tirzah. I don't know if he even had time to put different pictures up or anything, huh? Well, let's just listen. So now the troops were encamped against Gibbethon, which belonged to the Philistines, and the troops were encamped, heard it said, "Zimri has conspired and he has killed the king." Well, he did. No hide there. Therefore, all Israel made Omri the commander of the army over the Israel that day in the camp. Now, if you notice, it said that Zimri was commander of half the army. It very well may be Omri was commander of the other half. So basically, now you have former generals that are fighting against each other. King of Israel that day in the camp. So Omri went up from Gibbethon and all Israel with him, and they besieged Tirzah. When Zimri saw that the city was taken, he went to the citadel of the king's house and burned the king's house over him with the fire and pot. So, so this is what did he do when he saw that it wasn't going to be good for him? He burned down the house with him, did he not? So, I'm sure it was a nice house. It was the capital of Israel, the northern kingdom. It'd be like, if a president lost an election, and they said, "Well, I'm just going to burn down the White House, and they'll have to just suffer for the next time till they can do something else." So you want to know why Tirzah eventually was not the capital? Well, when Zimri saw it was over, he burned everything down with himself, and he died because of his sins that he committed, doing evil in the sight of the Lord, walking in the way of Jeroboam. I think most people, if they ever contemplate it, they want to be remembered doing some good things, good family man, good whatever. If they were business, they want to be known for their business. If they were, whatever, they want to be known. But how would you like to be known as the standard that everyone is compared to that are sinful? That is uh, that's pretty bad. Jeroboam. So this guy's also walked in the way of Jeroboam, and for his sin which he committed, making Israel to sin. Now the rest of the acts of Zimri and the conspiracy that he made, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the Kings of Israel? So uh, Zimri. Okay, Let's see now. So let's go to Omri. Maybe he'll do better. Uh, he lasts a little bit longer, 12 years. So then the people of Israel were divided in two parts. Half the people followed Tibni, the son of Ginath, to make him king, and half followed Omri. So we have a division. Okay. Now, so if this was a true history book, if this was like a novel, what would you expect to see now? A lot of the battles, the details, who the soldiers were, how many people died on each side. But we don't get this in this case. It says, but the people who fought Omri overcame the people who followed Tibni, the son of Ginath. So Tibni died and Omri became king. That's it. There's no details. Why aren't there details? It make a good story. There probably was some heroic battles and some. So why do you think we don't have any information on it? Do we always get a lot of detailed information in the Old Testament about events? Neither one of these, I'm sure, were good, righteous men, as you'd say. It really isn't important. It doesn't matter. It actually is unique that they actually reference this Tibni. Now, what's amazing, the Bible does a lot of things like this, and I haven't researched this, but a lot of times what will happen is you'll find archaeological evidences that will note a individual, and you're like, who is this? And a lot of times you can find it. So, I think God is so above our intellect and our thinking that he scatters little things in there that become proofs for us many, many years later. And a lot of these obscure fellows, they have found evidences of these people. And so it just fortifies our faith because these were real people. So Timni died. In the 31st year of Asa, king of Judah, Omri began to reign over Israel, and he reigned for 12 years. 6 years he reigned in Tirzah. So he still reigned. My guess is he had to, I don't know if he had to stay at the hotel town or what, but he had to find him a place to live, maybe his own house before that. And he bought the hill of Samaria from Shemer for 2 talents of silver. Don't know what land went for back then, but that's what he bought. And he fortified the hill and called the name of the city that he built Samaria. So there wasn't a Samaria before this. After the name of Shemer, so apparently, if you get to the Hebrew, it's a derivation. Shemer and Samaria. Samaria is a derivation of Shemer and the owner of the hill. So Samaria, even though it might be kind of somewhat vaguely mentioned, as you see here, it wasn't actually a city yet. It wasn't a town. And so he named it after the person he bought it from. So Samaria. So Samaria comes into play now. Samaria is going to be the capital. Samaria is going to be the most dominant city in all of the northern kingdom, and it came about because of Omri. So just interesting that you can turn to when this city began, and it becomes so influential. It's even very influential in the New Testament times, and it becomes so dominant that it became known as the name of the whole country in many aspects. Kind of like if you say New York, now maybe some might think of the state, but just about everybody thinks of the city. But the city and the state are the same name. So Samaria was like that. It was so dominant compared to the rest of the country that the country became known as Samaria as well. So here's that map again. You can see these places. By the way, there's some other interesting places. You see Jericho. Jericho was in the northern kingdom. You see Bethel and Ai. They were right on the line, and my guess that line kind of moved. You see Joppa. You see Megiddo. Now that You ever heard of the Battle of Armageddon? That becomes a very famous battle site of all kinds of battles. And so you see these different places there and there. But you see this group here, probably the more famous cities. Uh, and really, Tirzah becomes kind of very, it kind of loses its luster, you might say, in the rest of the time. Much like, so, what was it? Little Rock was not the first capital in Arkansas. It was someplace in the Delta area. But I don't even think that's a city anymore, town anymore. It's, uh, yeah, but it's kind of like, it's just like, I think they had some natural disasters that kind of messed it up, and it's just little, I mean, it not even as big as Boonville. It's just a little hole in the wall. And but it was the first capital of Arkansas. But when they moved the capital, it kind of, where was that? It was in the Delta region. It was a like a trading post in the early days. So like before Arkansas became a state, it was a trading post. You had a lot of course, Arkansas was part of the Louisiana Purchase, so it was a trading post before the Louisiana Purchase. And when the Louisiana Purchase happened, they made this Arkansas territory and or part of it. I don't think it was quite the whole state, and so they made it Arkansas the state, and so it became the city because it was the trading post right along the Mississippi River. Well, so why would it be along Mississippi River? What was the way you traveled back then? You didn't have roads; you used rivers. So it was along the Mississippi River, and so that's why. And so, early on, though, Arkansas, Little Rock became the prominent city. Of course, it has a river too, but uh, mhm. Oh, okay, yeah, historical. But for something that was a capital at one time, uh, it's not quite as bad as that one. But in Georgia, I think it was a town called Milledgeville was the original capital of Georgia. In fact, Atlanta wasn't even in the original state. It was kind of more eastern part of Georgia, and Milledgeville's still a little town, and some of the old historic remnants of being a capital there. But once again, it lost its luster when they moved the capital to Atlanta. And, but anyway, so that happened to Tirzah. Uh, so in verse 25 it says, so Omri did what was evil in the sight of the Lord, and he did more evil than all who were before him, for he walked in the way of, once again, Jeroboam son of Nebat, and in the sins that he made Israel to sin, provoking the Lord, the God of Israel, to anger by their idols. Now the rest of the acts of Omri are they that he did, and the might that he showed, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the Kings of Israel? By the way, that's not to be confused with the book of Chronicles. This is the official, chronicle. My guess is it had a lot of detail about that. But anyway, it's just the official. Uh, and Omri slept with his fathers and was buried in Samaria. Like I say, it's fully transitioned. Samaria is now the major. By the way, where was the first capital of the U.S.? They actually had, don't call it a White House. I don't think it was actually white. Yeah, 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 yeah. George Washington actually lived in a house right there. The house is no longer standing, but you can see they have excavated the footing, and all that around it. They've laid it out where you can see. It's not very big, really, by modern White House standards, but you can go tour it and everything. Yeah, it's in a. To me, it's the weirdest city in the U.S. because you've got these monumental historic things, and then you look a block over and you see these big, huge skyscrapers. So it just looks weird. Whereas Washington D.C., everything's the historical footprint of it. But well, let's give you some hints. So when you look through these footers and everything, there's this somewhat open air building, and you got this big, huge bell. And then as you look just probably, well, 100 feet, you've got this old building that's named Independence Hall, where the Declaration of Independence was signed. So where's that at? Man, you need to go back and learn your history. Yeah, that's Philadelphia. So Philadelphia is where uh, that was. And so, of course, it didn't really hurt Philadelphia when they moved it to Washington D.C., uh, but that was the original presidential house. And I forget what happened to it. It tells you there what happened to it, why it's not standing anymore. And just 3 or 4 blocks down, you've got this. They have replicated it. It had wasn't been preserved, but they rebuilt it exactly the way it would have looked when Thomas Jefferson was a boarding house, and it's where he wrote the on June the 11th, 1776. He came to that boarding house and he started working on the Declaration of Independence, and he dated it when he first presented it, July the 4th. Although that's not actually when it was signed, but that's when it's dated. So if you still see copies of it. You can go to the archives, and they've got the original one. Um, can't take pictures of it though. And it says Declaration of Independence, July 4, 1776. That's why we celebrate that date, even though they signed it, I think, a couple of days later. Uh, but he wrote that, and what's so funny about it is, once again, Philadelphia. So you got that historical thing. You're like, oh yeah, I can kind of vision. You know, right next to it is a Dunkin' Donut. so, so he had some Dunkin' Donuts and some coffee, and that's how he was able to stay up all night and write the documents. But it's really neat if you're into history, some of that to see, to actually go to places where you see the history. And by the way, that was not when the battle started. The battle started, I think it's April 19th, 1775. That was the what's called the shot heard around the world, and that was in Massachusetts, Concord and Lexington, not far from Boston. In fact, if you go there now, it's kind of neat. You'll see some different things, but you're in Boston, you know, you're in the metropolitan area of Boston. But it's neat to be there where they did those things. And that's one reason I'd love to go to the Holy Lands one day, just so that you can walk some of the areas where they had walked. Because it's a little neat. When you go in some of those places, and you're like, so and so actually walked through here. He actually was here. Um, but anyway, something I recommend anyone do if you're a history fan, if you're like a lot of the like our country, it's good to go research some of the history and see some of the things that were done. Um, the big portrait, there's a big portrait in the U.S. Capitol building in the rotunda, and I'm talking about it's got the players that signed the Declaration of Independence and wrote it. Uh, John Hancock was the chairman of the committee, but the people are life size on it. That's how big the paint portrait is. I mean, it's just, and they've got them all around this rotunda, all around it. But on that one, it was well known that Thomas Jefferson and John Adams, they had a rivalry. They didn't like each other. And so in the portrait, he put a little, we'd call it an Easter egg now, but he shows Thomas Jefferson as he is presenting John Hancock the Declaration of Independence. There was a committee of three, and I forget oh, I know it was. So there was a committee of three that were given the commission to write the Declaration of Independence. It was Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, and Benjamin Franklin. And Benjamin Franklin was probably 40 years older than the other two. But uh, so, but those three decided that Jefferson probably be best to write the draft. So then he wrote the draft, and they finally edited it. But so in the portrait, Thomas Jefferson's handing the copy of the Declaration of Independence uh, to John Hancock. And while he's doing it, the portrait shows him he's put his foot on John Adams' foot, like to keep him from getting in the spotlight. Just kind of humorous. Getting into the spotlight, keep him back because he's got his foot on him, so he can't go up there and be part of the handing it over to him. Now, that probably isn't real. That probably didn't happen, but the guy that painted the portrait, he did it to demonstrate that. Now, the portrait was done, decades later, but it is amazing. You see the Capitol building, you see all that history, um, and you go to the archives, which is in the Smithsonian Archives building, and they do have the original. There are, I think I read, 20 copies still left of the Declaration of Independence. They did about 200 of them, and they went different places. Uh, got some money if you got a copy. By the way, it's a handwritten copy. However, the copies, how you can tell the copy from the original is none of the copies have the signatures. So, what's well known about the Declaration of Independence, you got that big, huge signature of John Hancock and all the other men. However, the copies didn't have the signatures. The copies just was copy of the text. Uh, President Trump has a copy, it's one of the original copies, though, in his Oval Office now, and he's got a little curtain that he can open up and show it. But the original is in the archives, and you go into this dark room, and they've got the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution side by side, 3 different displays here. You can't hardly read them. I mean, they're just so, time is, but so they got it dark. You can read it if you really take your time. They're backlit in a special, light that won't damage them. And you have to put your phones away before you go in this room. And they have like Secret Service individuals that are guarding these 3 documents. And you go in there and, you know, see it. The photos you've seen have been allowed by professionals that are using equipment that doesn't do damage. But when I was in there and looked through it, it's neat. This one guy, he gets a phone call. He gets his phone out, and this large Secret Service guy comes up to him and grabs him by the wrist and says, "Put your phone away, or I'm gonna put you away." That's it. It's like I said, I put it phone. He said, "Put it away," and so I put it away. Well, but so they take it seriously. You're not gonna. Uh, Somebody snuck in something, tried to throw something on it. It didn't do any damage, but they must have done it really quick because, like I said, them guys, they don't mess around. So, anyway, Omri slept with his fathers and was buried in Samaria. Ahab, his son. Like I said, we know Ahab. Next week, I will read some from the AP Study Bible about this and these times. But so we're going to get into Ahab. What do we know about Ahab before we even read it? I'm one of the very, very few that you're going to know a little bit about, especially in the northern kingdom. Who was Ahab's wife? Probably the most infamous woman. Her and Delilah would have a neck and neck running, I think. So, who was Ahab's queen? Jezebel. Yeah, Jezebel. So King Ahab and Jezebel. And we would probably say today's vernacular, that it was Jezebel that wore the pants in that family. She was pretty ruthless. But Ahab becomes king. It says in the 38th year, now Asa's been king, what is he? He's king like 50, 52, yeah, something like that. Yeah. And 41, just 41. Okay. It gets, some of them get longer. So Asa's still king all throughout all this. Uh, 38th year of Asa king of Judah, Ahab the son of Omri began to reign over Israel, and Ahab the son of Omri reigned over Israel and Samaria 22 years. Uh, like I say, his reign is decent number of time, but it uh, it isn't extremely long compared to some. Uh, but a lot happens in his time. Ahab, the son of Omri, did evil in the sight of the Lord more than all who were before him. Now, wait a second. so, so these people were bad, right? And in fact, one of them was so bad that God cut his lineage off. Uh, but it says about Ahab, he did evil more than all who were before him. Uh, that's significant. And as if it had been a light thing for him to walk in the sins of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, he took for his wife Jezebel, the daughter of Ithbaal, king of the Sidonians, who went and served Baal and worshipped him. He erected an altar for Baal in the house of Baal, which he built in Samaria. And so we're going to get some people that you're going to be familiar with in the Bible in Ahab. And a lot of it's because of this erecting of Baal. And Ahab made an Asherah. Ahab did more to provoke the Lord, the God of Israel, to anger than all the kings of Israel who were before him. Now, all means all. So that means even Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, Ahab, uh, did more things. Uh, Jezebel. So you have the Baal. The Baal was a masculine god. It was a god that, like I say, it's generally in stone or bronze or something, and they would erect it on a high place, and that's where the altars were built. You have the Asherah. Asherah was a female goddess, goddess of fertility and other things. These predate the uh, Greek and Roman gods, but so they would worship the Asherah underneath a big tree. And a lot of times it was more women that would worship the Asherah, and the men would be more in the Baal. But so they did both for everything. And so, like I say, very soon. 1 Kings 16:34, in the days of Hiel of Bethel built Jericho. He laid its foundation at the cost of Abiram, his first son, and set up its gates at the cost of his youngest son, Segub, according to the word of the Lord, which he spoke by Joshua, the son of Nun. Now, it's interesting, this took place during this time, but uh, this was done uh, to fulfill something way back from Joshua's time. Uh, and Joshua 6:24 and 26 says, they burned the city with fire and everything in it, on the silver and gold, and the vessels of the bronze and iron, and they put the treasury of the house of the Lord. But Rahab the prostitute and her father's household, all who belonged to her, Joshua saved alive. And she has lived in Israel to this day. Of course, that's the day of right under Joshua, because she hid the messengers whom Joshua spent to spy out Jericho. Joshua laid an oath on them at the time, saying, cursed before the Lord be the man who rises up and rebuilds this city, Jericho, at the cost of his firstborn. He shall lay its first foundation, and at the cost of his youngest son shall he set up the gates. So that's what he's done. Okay. Now, think back to Rahab. What happened to Jericho? They blew the trumpets, broke the pitchers, they walked around, and they destroyed it, everything. And it was to stay destroyed. And there was even a warning what would happen if someone rebuilt it. And this foolish man, Hiel, that's what he did. It cost of his firstborn. Uh, it cost us, and so just according to exactly what we said. So we're going to get more into Ahab. We'll spend some time in Ahab because Ahab, you get the start of these, maybe one of the greatest prophets ever, Elijah, is who's the mighty prophet during this time. What's interesting is Elijah and Elisha, they lived in the northern kingdom. They were prophets during the time of the Northern Kingdom. How many of the kings were good? None. And so even these people who had abandoned God with the kings they chose, God didn't give up on them. And so these prophets would be in this northern kingdom, which it also is kind of silly too, the way the Jews thought of the Samaritans in the New Testament. Uh, and I think you see that the fact that God had not forgot about them, even in the New Testament, and that there's a lot of interactions. And the first place that the gospel was taken to, other than Judea, was to Samaria. So, any thoughts or questions? We did pretty good on time, I think. Well, that's the end. Next week, we'll get into Ahab and we'll start talking about Elijah. Obviously, we're going to talk about Jezebel. What I think is interesting is when Elijah defeats uh, the prophets of Baal, you would think that would be the end of Ahab, but it's not. And it's interesting because God is so much more patient than I think any of us ever would be. And even though Ahab provoked him so greatly, uh, Ahab would be given opportunities to, this is the power of God. But anyway, we'll get into that next week.